Hi, in this video we'll be talking about the 8th grade cohort longitudinal study, which is a product created by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. This is the website where we have most of our higher ed data, and the 8th grade cohort information can be found here on the right hand side. So once you download the Excel workbook, you'll see there's all sorts of data, tabs and tabs of data. It can be hard to navigate, it's not very user friendly. But fortunately, there are some resources that have made it more accessible to non-data nerds. One of them is the Texas Tribune website, right here. This is, you can find it at schools.texastribune.org. And here they show you data from the 8th grade cohort longitudinal study for Region 5, which is just east of Houston. And here they publish tables. They have these graphs where they've actually appended 10 years of data from the 10 years of 8th grade cohort studies, and they show you breakouts by race and ethnicity, Black, Hispanic, white, other. But it's hard to compare these outcomes across the different regions in Texas. So what we wanted to do is create a series of maps that would make it more immediately accessible for people who are just interested in taking sort of a casual glance at the results of the 8th grade cohort study. So here they are. The first map shows completion rates and enrollment rates across Texas. Here you can see that the enrollment rates are around 50% for most of the state, and completion rates are much lower. Here, I'll move that over there. Much lower, around 20%. And this is completion rates for target populations. Now there's the state higher education strategic plan identifies target populations that have historically lagged behind the overall population of students in terms of college enrollment and especially completion rates. So this looks at the completion rates for the different target populations: African American, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, and male students. But it's kind of helpful to put into context where these target populations are. For example, we look at African Americans, and here throughout all the state, the region with the highest levels of completion rates for African Americans is down in the lower Rio Grande Valley. Here, 20% of African American 8th graders were found to have completed a higher ed degree within 6 years of their high school graduation. But if we go to the next map, click on African Americans, this shows the distribution of African Americans across the state. So down in the valley, the percentage of African Americans as a total of all the 8th graders that were tracked rounds to 0. If you hover over, you can drill down, and it shows you there were 60 African Americans in a cohort of 26,581. So this gives you a sense of how much importance you should put into a number that could vary wildly from year to year because it's tracking so few students. Interesting for me, I'm not from Texas, this map also shows you where African Americans make up a higher concentration of the cohort, especially in East Texas, whereas in North, West, and South Texas, there's a lot fewer. You can also look at the distribution of Hispanic students and economically disadvantaged students, which was also surprising to me to see the very high rates of students identified as economically disadvantaged in the 8th grade cohort throughout the state. And the last two maps we'll show you is about percentage point differences in enrollment rates. So this is comparing the cohort, the overall cohort to the different target populations. So here, African American, -4 percentage points. What that means is the overall cohort, 54% enrolled in higher ed, whereas for African Americans, only 50%. So their percentage point difference is a 4% difference. But in East Texas, check it out, where we saw there was higher percentages of African Americans among the 8th graders. Their percentage point difference is 0 in a lot of places. Here they enroll at higher rates or slightly lower rates, no big change. But compare that to the difference in completion rates, where we see them completing at lower rates than the rest of the 8th grade cohort that they were tracked with. So those are the maps. And one last thing we'll show you before we go is that if you're feeling really ambitious, maybe want to create your own maps, we put in annotated Python code. This is the code that we use to create these maps. So you could use it sort of as a cookbook, create your own maps, maybe put your own spin on it, take your own unique look at the data. There's lots of data in there to explore, and we have not by any means exhausted all the possibilities. So if that's something that's interesting to you, we invite you to take a look at that. And thank you for watching this video.